Hello everybody, good evening. You are welcome. I can welcome you here in the Grafische Werkplaats in The Hague between all the materials and the exhibition of Festival Analog Eco. My name is Carola van der Heijden. I run the Grafische Werkplaats and also organizing this festival. And one of the speakers today, Simone de Waart, has a beautiful quote about innovation, and she will tell more about it later. And now innovation, it goes about to look further than your own surroundings, to have an open mind and to work together. And for the festival I choose fashion, and with the quote I think, oh, that's precisely why I choose fashion, because fashion needs to have change. There are a lot of key innovation in fashion, and what means that for printed matter? Can we learn about it? And I think in this festival we can talk with each other about it, we can think about it, and I hope we can show you some beautiful examples for innovations. And I hope also you can see it in the workshops and in the exhibition. Former years we organized Festival Analog with Textile, and 2 years later about Festival Analog Borders, about the borders of graphic design and graphical techniques. And in 2020 we organizing analog patterns. And now in 2021 we organizing Festival Analog Eco. And I would like to thank all the team which are organizing this festival. There are a lot of people who are working together to form and to organize this festival. So thanks everybody. And I will also thank the fundings which make the festival possible. And special thanks to Gemeente Den Haag, Stichting Stokroos, Gravin van Bieland Stichting, Fonds 1818, Cultuurfonds Prins Bernhard, Zuid-Holland, Stroom Den Haag en het Pure Energiefonds. And I hope you will enjoy this festival, enjoy the symposium. And then it's, for me, it's only say to introduce the moderator of today, it's Nanette Hogervorst. So welcome, Nanette.
Well, thank you for welcoming Carola. Hello everyone, so great that you're following the live stream. Well, we have a great program this afternoon for you coming up with really inspiring speakers. The program will consist out of 3 blocks. The first is sustainability, the second will be the opening of the exhibition, and of course the third is about materials. Well, the first speaker I will announce in a minute, but a few practicalities, because unfortunately we're not all here at Grafische Werkplaats, but we're all at home in our seats, or maybe you're lounging, I don't know. But in this platform you will see at the right of your live stream, if you're on a desktop, you'll see a chat. So if you have any technical issues, IT things, then you can just leave your comment there, and then we'll try to help you as much as possible. If you have more question about the talk or the exhibition, something about the content, then below the live stream there is also a form where you can type in your question, send it, and then we will get it directly. And after each talk we will answer as much of your questions as possible, so we still have a little bit of an interactive afternoon. Well, so far the practicalities for today, and then we'll announce the first speaker. The first speaker is an amazing smart lady, Kim Poldner. She's professor circular business at The Hague Applied Sciences, and she's also affiliated with the Wageningen University and Research, where she actually is the founder of the Circular Fashion Lab. Also, the list goes on. She has also developed the MOOC, Design, Science and Value in a Sustainable Clothing Industry. And besides being an academic, she also knows fashion from the inside out. She also studied fashion and management at Amsterdam Fashion Institute, and she was one of the first people who founded an eco-fashion store in Amsterdam. Well, enough about her. I think we're all very curious about what she is going to tell you for the next few minutes. If you have a question, leave it in the form, then we address it afterwards. And then I'd like to give the floor to Kim Poldner. So join us.
Kirsten? So, thank you so much, Nanette, for welcoming me. Thank you, Grafische Werkplaats, for having me today and sharing a little bit about my passion for sustainable fashion. Yes, indeed, you already told some things about how I came to be so excited about sustainable fashion. I actually started as a 13-year-old drawing and making my own clothing, and then went on to study fashion, do a PhD in sustainable entrepreneurship in the fashion industry, and here I am today talking to you. So my love for fashion is what is underlying all my activities. So I love fashion, okay? So I love the joy, the pleasure, the glamour of fashion. But when I learned that the fashion industry actually has a very dark side to it, I was of course super disappointed. So I hope that today, my talk, I will point out a little bit that dirty business of the fashion industry. But of course I hope that at the end, you will also be ignited and love your clothes even more, and also know how you can make a little contribution to a more sustainable fashion industry. So here are some dirty facts about the fashion industry. First of all, the industry is responsible for about 10% of worldwide CO2 emission. And it's expected that in 2050, it will even add up to 25% of global emissions. The problem is that the fashion industry is using a lot of non-renewable resources, such as the polyester fabrics that are in many of the clothes that we wear, and that actually create microplastics that then come into the environment. Other than that, we're also using a lot of water. For example, for the growth of the crop cotton, which is of course used a lot in the fashion industry. But also when we're dyeing our fabrics, there's a lot of water use and also a lot of chemicals and pesticides use. So all of these things make that the fashion industry is extremely bad for the environment. I mean, in China, we see blue rivers. People are really suffering and getting health issues because they're working in this industry. At the same time, the t-shirt that you're wearing is probably really a world traveler, you know, because we grow the cotton in a country like India, then it's shipped to, for example, China, where it's being spun and woven into fabric, then it's going to Bangladesh, where the fabric is dyed, and then it's sewn into your t-shirt, shipped to a European country, where we as end consumers buy the t-shirt. So what we see happen is that the last 2 decades, we see a huge increase in how much fashion we consume, we buy, and at the same time, we don't wear our clothes as often anymore as before. And that, of course, is strange because, you know, the idea is that you cherish your clothes, but what we're doing is we buy something, we wear it much less often, and we dispose of our clothes much faster, actually. So what happens is that we end up with this huge textile mountain of waste. I've been in some big companies here in the Netherlands where I really saw these types of piles and batches of textile waste. And those are all consisting of our discarded clothing. And it's really shocking that the COVID pandemic last year, and still we're in the midst of it, of course, but what we saw in the first lockdown in the Netherlands is that many people had time to clean out their closet. Many people had time to clean out their closets, and they brought all their discarded textiles to textile containers, but then the textile sorting and collecting companies in the Netherlands had no idea what to do with it, you know, because it's not so easy anymore to ship our discarded textiles to, for example, African countries, because we're messing up their labor market in those countries. So many countries also put a ban on our secondhand textiles. So it's really a problem. And aside from that, COVID has also disclosed that we're very dependent on these global supply chains, right? So when suddenly production in the Southeast Asian countries is not happening anymore and clothes cannot be shipped to European markets, then we cannot access it any longer, right? So basically the COVID pandemic has really unveiled all these issues that we're already dealing with in the fashion industry for a long time, but it has become even worse and more visible to the outside world. But luckily, I'd say there are 3 pathways to change and to a more sustainable fashion industry that I, of course, love to talk with you about. First of all, we see a rise in conscious consumption. So what happened was that the last year, many people started cleaning out their closets, but also started consuming less because a crisis puts a brake on their wallet and on their spendings. And they start to also think a little bit more about what types of items they want to buy, if they want to buy something. Because of course, you don't need that many clothes when you're just sitting behind your desk in Zoom calls the whole day. So for example, fashion platform List has seen a rise of about 37% in search terms online when it comes to sustainability and ethical fashion, 37%. And this also translates to sales. So for example, Dutch fashion brands such as Mud Jeans, but also Joline Jolink, they have very strong online channels, and they actually saw a doubling in sales. So many fashion brands went bankrupt last year, but these sustainable fashion brands actually flourished, since Corona. So that is amazing. Of course, Patagonia is a wonderful example of a pioneer when it comes to sustainable fashion. They're promoting not buying any of their clothes, but they also have a lot of different business models in place by now. For example, to cherish repair, to also sell secondhand, for example, to their customers. So they're really one of the pioneering companies that has been around for a couple of decades. What we also see when it comes to conscious consumption is the rise, of course, in e-commerce. People started shopping much more online. And even though that can be very detrimental when we're thinking about the packaging that needs to be sent back and forth between companies and consumers' homes, at the same time we also see a rise, for example, in resale. So secondhand platforms have really exploded, basically. For example, the Dutch United Wardrobe was acquired by Vinted last year with the idea that Vinted will become the biggest second-hand fashion resale platform in Europe. And I think they're really on their way there. At the same time, we also see big companies such as H&M, such as Levi's, such as Tommy Hilfiger, such as Zalando that have embraced the second-hand market and actually opened possibilities for their customers to send second-hand clothing and buy second-hand clothing from them. So second-hand is also a huge trend, actually. So let me take you to the second pathway that I see that is really promising when we're talking about making the fashion industry a bit more sustainable, and that is digital fashion. To be very honest with you, my dream day in this lockdown Zoom reality would be that I can just sit in my black onesie, like what my children are wearing, and that I can change my outfit depending on the call that I'm in, just like I change my virtual background, basically. So this is actually my first digital fashion outfit that I purchased. I don't have it in my closet, unfortunately, or fortunately, but I bought it from a wonderful pioneering digital fashion company. And yeah, it's my first attempt to become more sustainable in that way. How nice would it be, to just sit in your onesie, in your uniform, and then to change your outfits with every Zoom meeting that you have. Anyways, what we see in the fashion industry is that last year, of course, because of Corona, people could not travel, and suddenly all the fashion shows were online. So that is, we could not have thought about that last year around this time, but it happened, For example, Balenciaga created launched their next fashion collection through a video game, an online video game called Afterworld. But of course, we have the Amsterdam-based digital fashion pioneer, The Fabricant, that was probably one of the first in the world that started with this. One of the collaborations that they did was with Carlings, and that really made Instagram explode. But they have collaborated with many fashion brands nowadays. Since the COVID pandemic, their popularity has increased. And why? Because they offer a digital showroom, without any material, physical examples and samples needed. So that is really fascinating. In fact, the Fabricants sold or auctioned a few years ago already their first digital outfit for $9,500. Can you imagine? It just exists in virtual reality. And the Fabricant is not the only pioneer in this field. We even see that Vogue, for example, launched one of their covers, so the magazine Vogue. They had their first digital photo model on the cover last year. And in fact, one of these two ladies here, and you might not even see who it is, but doesn't exist in flesh and blood. She's a digital fashion model. Her name is Lil Michaela. She's sitting on the sofa in a yellow dress. And she has 2.3 million followers on Instagram. So, everything is possible in a digital fashion reality. And then let me take you to the third pathway that I see for a more sustainable fashion industry. And that is what I call resilient supply chains. I already talked a little bit about supply chains and how we have become much more dependent on them, even though if we look at 100 years ago, Europe had a flourishing manufacturing industry. There were textile manufacturing factories all around Europe. We even had child labor here. You cannot imagine, but it's true. And all of this has, of course, been outsourced to Southeast Asia and other countries around the world with much lower wages. And that is a pity, because that has made that offshoring, as we call it, that has made the fashion industry so complex and so polluting also as it is today. So what we're seeing right now is that we're moving back production to European lands, countries, and also to the US, for example. So we're bringing production slowly back to the consumer in Western markets. And of course, this is just a little niche at the moment. It's not happening mainstream yet, but it is happening. What I personally find a very inspiring example is the company I Did. Here, located in The Hague, in the Netherlands, what they do is they collaborate with corporate partners, and they collect their discarded corporate workwear, make new, they basically recycle those textiles into a felt material. This is what you see in the image here. The bag is made out of that material, and they produce new products out of it. So they collaborate with clients such as Heineken and IKEA and the Efteling, which is an attraction park in the Netherlands, and energy companies, huge companies really. So far, they were reliant on the processing of those discarded textiles to do that in factories in the east of the Netherlands or even in Germany. So they had to cross the border to be able to do that. But at the moment, they're building a factory themselves here in The Hague, which is really exciting because it means that they can close the loop, as we call it, on a more local level, which is super interesting, especially because the municipality of The Hague wants to keep the sorted and collected textiles that is being donated by the people that live in The Hague. They want to keep it within The Hague. At the moment, it's being, taken to Rotterdam, shipped abroad, etc. But the municipality really wants to keep it here, and, for example, bring the nice vintage items to the wonderful secondhand stores that you find here in the city, or to the clothing library that you find here in The Hague. And of course, the items that cannot be recycled any longer can then go to the company I Did and be recycled into this felt material. And that is what we call creating a local production network, where we're, making out of our textile waste new products for the markets. For example, these baskets are being sold at IKEA. We also see a rise in local handcraft and workshops and ateliers and businesses for local production of all kinds of sustainable fashion brands here in the Netherlands. Studio Rijn is one example, but there's really a surge in the Netherlands and basically revaluing or reclaiming of the value of local production or made in Holland. And we see that not just in the Netherlands, but in different countries in the world. So I hope that I've somehow inspired you with the 3 pathways for a future-proof fashion industry. So again, more the conscious consumption, which is happening, maybe even already with you. The second one was digital fashion, and the third one was resilient supply chains. We see that these trends, and some other trends, of course, as well, are very much changing the landscape of the fashion industry and are contributing to making the industry more fair, more equal, more sustainable. So when it comes to you, and maybe that's what you're asking yourself right now after hearing me speak about this, what can I do, to contribute, to do something about sustainability in fashion? Well, I think we go back to loving your own clothes. Like I love fashion. Shop in your own wardrobe is what I would say. That's the most sustainable thing that you can do. And if you're really thinking, I want something new, I need something new to complement my wardrobe, then go out and find the beautiful sustainable fashion brands that are out there. There are so many by now. When I started in 2005, there were a handful in the world, and now there are hundreds to choose from. So this is such a luxury, And then also when you pick an item, choose something that that will last you for years in terms of quality, in terms of style, so that you will wear it over and over and over again. And when you take care of it, cherish it, repair it when it's broken, wash it not too hot, don't dry clean it, but just hang it on a line. These are such simple things. And when you're finally ready to dispose of this item, and maybe it's still in good condition, just donate it to a friend or to, a textile donation company. There are so many different ways to make somebody else happy with your disposed wardrobe, basically. Or you can swap it, of course, with friends. So there are many opportunities to contribute, and I hope that you feel as much love for your clothes as I do. And thank you so much for your attention.
Well, Kim, great story. Thank you for sharing with us. We've got a few questions which I would like to ask. Well, the first one is you described 3 pathways. Mm-hmm. How do those pathways relate to each other? Is there one that you think that is going to be the most important one, or is it more in balance? Can you tell something about that?
Yeah, I think it's really, it's not one that is going to disrupt the entire industry. So it's really different movements that are happening in different areas that together create that transition of the fashion industry. So the conscious consumerism, I think this is a trend that has already been lingering for many years, mm-hmm. and maybe COVID gave it an extra push. So yeah. I think they all work together and create that transition. Yeah.
They maybe cannot do without each other in
also,
some extent.
Yeah.
And also because this is, of course, a maker's place. Mm-hmm. So, how can makers make them count to contribute to a more sustainable industry?
Well, I think, as a maker, you're also a human, you're a person. So you can start just by thinking about your own consumption behavior. I think that's step 1. And then in your profession as a maker, try to question, the materials that you're using. So I know, for example, that the poster for today's festival was made from recycled ink. How awesome is that, So challenge yourself, be critical. Ask questions and explore what opportunities are out there, because there's so many things that you can innovate, as Carola said in the beginning. Yeah.
And we have one here, and that is about she's interested in what's happening actually to the garment workers that are in Bangladesh.
Yes, that's a very good topic, of course. Well, the situation for many garment workers is terrible and has even been, going down the drain last year with COVID. Many of them were fired or could not work anymore, had to go back to their village. So we've seen some disastrous movements of large crowds of people that were suddenly without a job because of COVID. And I do worry about, when we're starting to buy here in the West more digital fashion, for example, or we're gonna buy more secondhand, or we're gonna borrow more items from the clothing libraries, that means that these people will also maybe use their source of income. So I know there is some work done at the moment by some PhD students here in the Netherlands that are exploring business models around specifically these groups at the beginning of the supply chain, and also look, for example, at the gender aspect, because this is, there's many young women working in the garment textile industry. And I hope that from that research that we will learn what works for them. Yeah. So what types of new business models do we need to come up with at that stage of the supply chain?
So you also say if we become, as a consumer, more conscious here in the West,
it has a huge impact.
It has a huge impact of all these, the start of the supply chain, where we then also have to find a solution for. Otherwise,
absolutely.
Yeah. And is it also that in researching that field, you already said there are some activities going on for what can they do. You hear a lot about resale, secondhand clothing. Do you feel that's now a little bit sometimes out of balance, that we focus too much on resale and a little bit less on the start of the supply chain?
I think that the discourse here in the Netherlands is mainly, yes, about that trend, for example. Yeah. So I'm happy that there are researchers at the moment working and looking at that part of the supply chain. Also Fashion for Good, of course, is working on that side of the supply chain, a Laudes Foundation. At the same time, I think it's great that we see a lot of secondhand. It's even predicted that within the next 10 years, the secondhand market for textiles will overtake the market share of fast fashion. So good. That is like, wow, that this is possible. At the same time, we need to be very cautious of the rebound effect, as I call it. And that means that a lot of people think, I'm now being very sustainable, buying only secondhand on vintage, and maybe they end up buying more than they used to be. So, and that of course, then still you have a negative impact on the environment. So, be conscious about that. And that is why I think it's also very important to have that mindset of being very aware with every, you as a consumer have power. Yeah. So be very aware with every choice you make, every purchase you make, where do you spend your money on? And not just textiles, of course, everything.
Yeah, and I think platforms, like you already said, like Vinted, I think that's, it's very good that they're there, but everything what's on the platform is not particularly sustainable, right?
No, there's a lot of fast fashion traded on these platforms, yes. And I think this is great also for people that maybe don't have so much money, of course. It's very accessible. So I don't want to judge that. The big criticism of sustainable fashion brands is often that it's unaffordable for many people, only for the green niche, that can pay those types of amounts. So I think that's the good thing, that it becomes more mainstream this way, much more accessible and affordable for many people. And at the same time, again, be aware of that rebound effect. Yeah.
And here's another question just coming in. Do you have more examples of collaboration between artists and fashion brands using also sustainable ways of working?
Yeah, I don't want to say too many things because there's some wonderful speakers coming today that actually have wonderful examples of how they collaborated with big brands. So I don't want to mention those.
Or maybe smaller initiatives that are maybe a little bit more in communities happening?
Difficult. I mean, for example, I myself am working on a research project right now with I Did and a sustainable couture designer. But this is still,
you cannot really tell everything about it. Okay. Well,
sorry. I'll get back to that later on.
Okay, almost a news life, but I think we're almost. Also in time, we're almost there. But there's also one question that says, okay, so digital fashion, how I mean, how do you? For a lot of people, it's still hard to grasp how you can,
of course,
wear that digitally.
Yeah.
So how far is that away, or is it really more of a vision of the future, and this is something we're not going to experience?
Actually, I have a student at the moment that I supervise for her graduation project. She's an industrial design engineer, so she really has this design expertise at the Hague University of Applied Science, of course. And she is designing an app at the moment to create digital fashion for Generation Z. Because what we see is that many of our students are really suffering from the lockdown and have, depression and anxiety, and well, the evening curfew is now over, but they have been really suffering, especially international students that are cut off from their families and stuff. So she's looking at how can we, social media is at least, an environment where they still can express themselves and their creativity and their identity. So she's exploring how she can serve that need and also to prevent, depression, etc., amongst Generation Z consumers through the use of digital fashion. And she has found some amazing initiatives. She's from Russia herself, in Russia, in all kinds of different countries. So this is really happening. I don't think it's very far away future. This is really already happening, and people are already playing with it, so this is really cool.
It's also a little bit more sustainable, right? That if you have an Instagram post, you don't buy new clothes.
No,
but have
absolutely, and that's what you see happening with the younger generations, is that they often buy something, take a selfie, put it on Instagram, and bring that item back to the store. So why then not make it a digital outfit? It's so much easier, and a digital fashion outfit is 1/10 of the impact of a physical material item as we are wearing it here today. So of course, I love, I did fashion design school. I love fabrics, I love colors, I like text. I love the materiality of fashion, but at the same time, this universe that can open to us in our virtual realities, I think it's very promising and very sustainable.
Yeah, so it's probably going to be more of a mix, that places like this will still be relevant in the future. But
absolutely,
also,
yes, absolutely. The maker spaces are super important. Also, when we're looking at the age of the amateur, as Liedewij Edelkoort forecasted it, with craft, the upsurge of crafts and people doing it themselves at home, and people experimenting with onion peel to dye their fabrics, and growing vegetables in their gardens, and transforming that to textiles, etc. So that material aspect and the maker's quality is still super important.
Well, sounds like a great, exciting future with digital craftsmanship and material craftsmanship. I think if there are no more questions, then I want to thank you for your great talk, for your inspiring words, and then we will go, I think, to the second part of this symposium, and that is, of course, the exhibition. I want to ask Carola again to...
Thank you for having me, Nanette.
Yes, thank you. To come and...
Yes, and sorry, it was raining a lot a few minutes ago, and we have a flat roof, so now it's dry, and I hope you can hear us better than a few minutes ago. We are here in the Werkplaats, and we always invite a group of artists and makers for a festival to come here to do research and to make new work. And it was last year in July, the group came and they meet each other, and they have a 2 days workshop, and we talk each other. Also Kim and Nanette were coming, and it was very nice. And until the last Saturday, they were worked here, and they all make new work for this exhibition. And it's a pleasure to introduce you now Eugène van Veldhoven, and he is related to the Grafische Werkplaats a long time away, for a long time. Eugène, welcome here.
Hello, Carola. When I have my little talk, I will use the word sustainable a few times, so you know that there's no confusion anymore about that. So I'm not a specialist in this topic, so that's also why I'm going to talk just a short while. It's really just a symbolic opening. We cannot stress enough, I think, that it's not just a symposium today and an exhibition that you can come to.
Yes, nearly every afternoon during this festival.
Do you have to make a booking, or can you?
No, you can come here, and if there are too many people, then you have to wait some minutes. But I think we have a big space, so come here. And we have not only the exhibition here, but also in the center we have a beautiful tour. You can walk alone, and then you see beautiful shops, and then there is a little pop-up exhibition in every shop.
There's workshops, like hands-on. In Dutch we say workshop, but in English workshop means the place we are in now. So that's when you say hands-on, I think, to keep it simple. There's walks, the guided tour to the garden where all the herbs are. Probably they're still like this, right?
Yeah.
First year, but a really great initiative. A garden in another part of the Hague with all kinds of herbs and plants to dye with. I've been in a think tank for this subject. Again, as I said, I'm not a specialist. But I really also pushed, and I'm really happy to see that there's now so many specialists that will have a talk today, or like next week. I think it's Tuesday morning, or there's also an online session with two specialists, Remy Veldhoven and
Anja Lehoning.
The screen fell out for a moment, but okay, I'm sure we're still online. Shall we just?
Yes, but first I want to notice the artist. Because we are only now seeing a little bit the work of Laura Luchtman, but upstairs there is an exhibition with new work of Annika Sirjamaki, Dewi Bekker, she will come soon, and Christa van der Meer, Yamuna Forzani, and Timon Visser, and with his friend Lily Higgins. 7 artists and 7 makers, and now by COVID we cannot do an opening, so you can do the opening.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want, which I always do when I talk about the Grafische Werkplaats in Den Haag, compliment them with getting so much done with just very modest amounts of money. It's super. There's a lot of volunteers working on it. Carola is not a volunteer, but I think quite a few hours are not being paid. It's always a pleasure to be here. If you don't know the specific place, do come one time. Check out online all the other things that are going on. And now I just would like to say the exhibition is open.
But first we have to...
Oh. Forgot the most important part.
So we say proost.
Cheers.
Cheers, and we open the exhibition. And for you, Tsaba has made a beautiful film, smart film about the exhibition. So we can look for it.
Welcome back. I hope you really liked the video of the exhibition, and it already gave you a little bit of a flavor what you can expect. So we hope to welcome you here. Well, from today, the exhibition is open until the 28th of May. You can come visit in the Grafische Werkplaats. Now we will have two speakers, two artists that already will tell a little bit about the work, about the background, their thought process behind it. The first speaker is Dewi Bekker. So I would say come and join me and just tell a little bit more about your work, the process behind it, and then okay, the floor is yours.
Okay, thanks. So I'm Dewi Bekker, and I'm part of the collective Das Leben am Havenkamp that consists of me, Gino Antonissen, Anouk van Klaveren, and Christa van der Meer. She's also participating in this exhibition. And usually I work on collective projects, but also on individual projects. And actually this the work that I have been creating for this exhibition is related to my individual practice. And within my individual practice, I usually work around the extent to which visual identity can be shaped. So I'm doing research into how material relates to the human body. And one of the main themes within my practice is the alter ego, and especially how the alter ego can be seen, because a human being can dress up as someone else and can put on like a body covering suit, and then that person can be seen as someone else. And that person might also get anonymous, because sometimes it deforms the body that much that we cannot relate to it. But at the same time, we can also project some like things onto objects or sculptures, and we can also recognize those things as a human being just by adding some facial expressions to it, or add some small details to a certain sculpture or objects. Then we can easily recognize ourselves in it. And actually that's also what I used as a source of inspiration for the work that I have been creating for this exhibition. So usually I'm someone who works mainly with objects, sculptures, body pieces that can be worn on the body, and also usually it's presented within an installation. And mainly, it's most of the time very colorful, and I use a lot of like casting techniques that are not always so eco-friendly. They can be like, it can be done with plastics, and I use that quite often, to be honest. Also silicons. And at the same time, I also work with like glass beads, handicraft, natural latex. So I usually work with things, with elements that are very eco-friendly and elements that are not at all. So for this exhibition, I have been trying to incorporate the use of natural inks within my existing practice and within the material use and aesthetics that I usually work with. So within this, so for this exhibition, when we were having the 2 days of introduction here in the Grafische Werkplaats, I have been experimenting with the silkscreen printing, and I have been trying to find ways of printing on natural latex. So I brought some latex, and I've been doing tryouts with different natural inks. Some of them were not attaching to the latex at all. Some were like very well attached to it. So in the end, I found out that this mixture of an ink of red cabbage with Arabic gum was causing this really nice effect, because when I was using it for the silkscreen printing, it almost looked like it was coated, and it almost looked like it was plastic, because it was like high class and it was laying on top of the material, but at the same time it was not falling off, it was attached to the latex itself. And I really liked this effect, because it didn't look like silkscreen printing at all, and at the same time it looked very contemporary too. So that's something that, that was an effect that I really liked. So after that, I decided to do more research into that. I have been making different mixtures of the ink and Arabic gum to find the right texture and the right mixture, and also look for the right color. Because if you add like vinegar to the red cabbage, it becomes more like bluish and purple. And if you don't, it becomes more red and pinkish. In the end, I liked it better with the vinegar, so I've been adding that to it to make it a little bit more blue and a little bit more purple, because I like it a little bit better when it's a little bit, the colors are more like cold. In the end, I chose to make use of a very simple print. I just have been silkscreen printing stripes, because I really like the effect and the glossiness of it. So I didn't want to have like a very like a print that was like an image in itself, because I thought that would just distract from the effect. So I just chose for very simple stripes. After I did the tryouts, I have been printing a bigger piece of latex, about 2 meters, and after that I cut it up into several pieces. And I have been draping it and gathering it together with, by using some embroidery techniques to kind of gather it in the middle at certain spots. And I have been doing that with some glass beads, because I really like to add some handicraft to it, to give it more of a personal touch. And after that, I have been adding some ears to it, next to the gathered parts. And in that way, people are very easily recognizing it as some kind of like face-like appearance, because the ears itself is enough to kind of see something as a face, especially when it's also, when I've been putting it up in exhibition, it's all about like, like eye height. So I think in that way people can recognize themselves into it. And then during introduction days, there was another technique that really caught my eye, and that was the riso printing. I really liked how you could work with all the colors and the layering, and also how you cannot really, well, you can control the technique to a certain extent, but it's still quite spontaneous. And I really like that. So I wanted to use that as a contradiction of the latex works, because the latex works are all like very natural in color. And usually I work with really bold colors. So I've been photographing these 5 works. And after that, I've been cropping them until A4 sized images, and I have been riso printing them. I have been building it up in several layers, in 2 or 3 layers, and in that way I could really play with some parts that were standing out a lot, some parts that were a little bit more subtle. Yeah, these are actually what you see now, the image are the images from the cropped pieces, the cropped images. So these are the A4 images, and that are the images that I have been riso printing. And in the end, it resulted in 5 riso prints that are all like very bright colored. And each of them is connected to one of the latex works. And in the end, I presented the 5 draped latex pieces next to the 5 riso print pieces, because to me, they are different series, but at the same time, they're also connected to each other and they're coming from the same source. So I think that was it that I wanted to explain about my work.
Thanks for elaborating on your great and colorful work.
Okay.
Was one of the things that I also noticed. Hey, it's very bright. Well, if you think about natural ink, it's not always the association you have with it. So how is it that this is actually, like you said, even look like more plastic or has these bright colors?
Actually, the plastic is just the latex that I was talking about, so that's not very colorful at all because that are just the natural colors itself. And the Riso print is just the ink from the Riso. I think it's soy-based. But yeah, all these colors in the Riso print are actually very colorful. So the main research that I did into the natural ink was actually with the latex pieces, and there the color is quite subtle. Yeah.
Oh, okay. And how, because the theme of the analog eco is of course sustainability. So how did that impact your way of working? You said you already wanted to use the natural ink, but is it also did it sort of change the way of how you looked at the materials or your way of working?
I think it's mainly, well, at least for this project, it mainly affected the way that I started to focus more on shape and less on color, because usually I tend to focus a lot on the color, but at the same time it's difficult with natural inks to get very bright colors. So I think therefore I have been looking more into the textures, and that's actually also how I got the coated result, because it's almost like, because of the Arabic gum, kind of sugar coated, but it was still very shiny. So I think it's that it focused more on like the texture and the shape of the pieces.
And you also told that you were using vinegar, cabbage, like all, what is it, fruits and whatever. So how does that work for people who are makers and watching or
well, actually, I mainly focused on using the red cabbage by, well, you can cook it for a while, just some raw red cabbage. You can cook it for like 1 or 2 hours, and then add some salt to it, I think. And after a while, the water that's left, the residue, is really like bright purple. And then you could add some vinegar to it in the process, and then it becomes even more purple and bluish. And if you don't, it becomes a little bit more red. And after that, I've been mixing it with the Arabic gum, because that makes it actually a little bit thicker. Because you need a certain, it needs to get a certain like paste, kind of like, to be able to silkscreen print with it. Because when it's just the ink itself, it doesn't work at all.
But you didn't know beforehand that it was going to look like this, so this is all
no, but I have to say, when we did the introduction days, there were already some pre-made natural inks that we could use, so I knew already for a bit, like, Arabic gum with the red cabbage is a nice combination that works with the latex, because I think I tried out 10 different types of natural inks, and then after that I started to make my own mixtures for that.
Okay, so then you could start experimenting.
Yeah, with like the proportions and
And was there a certain moment that you were like, hey, this is it, or this is how this is what I'm gonna make for this festival, or was it more of an organic sort of journey that's sort of came up to
I think it was very organic, because there were like I said, the Riso print that I really liked. At the same time, I also liked the printing on the latex, and at the same time, I also like it a lot better when it's more related to my own practice. So that's mainly the thing, how you can kind of recognize yourself into things that have a certain facial expression. And I always like it better when it kind of comes out of my like individual practice and my artist practice, and that it's not something that's really separated from it. So I think in the end the process was quite organic.
Yeah, and I think we have I think this is a final question that just came in. What did you like the most of the product that you did? Was it the experimenting, or was it the whole thing that it now comes together into an exhibition?
I think I really liked the experimenting a lot. And also actually the creation of the pieces, because at a certain point you get something in mind and you try to achieve that image that you were having in mind, but it's always really exciting to get there, because you never know exactly how it's going to work out. And especially, for example, with the Riso printing, you cannot control it 100%. So it's really exciting to see how it comes out.
It's also always a little bit of a surprise when there's printing. You're like, okay,
yeah, there's always a
is
surprising element, and I really enjoy that.
Okay. A final question someone asked is, what do you think about the sustainability trend, or how do you also use it maybe in your own practice? Not particularly this.
I have to say that usually I think if there's like a good sustainable option, you should always go for it and explore it. So that's how I usually work within my practice. If there's like a good alternative, I would use that. But at the same time, I also work as an autonomous artist, and sometimes there are also for aesthetic reasons that you make different decisions. So I try to do it as much as possible, but it's not always like that.
Well, no one is 100% sustainable, I guess, right? So, I think if from the audience there are no more questions, then I think, well, thank you. Before you go, before I forget, we still have a little present. We have the publication also
thank you.
of
That's
the
great. Thanks.
Of the festival.
Yeah, I'm really curious, so thanks.
All in-house printed, so thank you for your talk and for explaining a little bit more about your work.
Yes.
Then we will go to the next speaker, who is also one of the artists who collaborated with an Analog Eco Festival, and that's Laura Lichtman. So I would say, come and join me over here. I think maybe some people know Laura because I think she's one of the experts on bacterial dyeing techniques here in the Netherlands, and she will also tell a little bit. I think it's also part of the work here, but you're going to tell everything about the work right now. So, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. My name is Laura Luchtman, and I'm a textile and surface designer. I mostly start my work from research. I really like to dive into a subject that is ecological or social, or it has some kind of like social aspect to it, and I really like to dive in and do a lot of research, and then I translate that research into very minimalistic, abstract forms and shapes. Color is a big part of my work, and I've actually been researching natural, sustainable alternatives to color for a lot of years. One of the projects that I'm working on for 4 years now is the Live in Color project, together with designer Ilva Siebenaar. And together we are dyeing textiles with pigment-producing bacteria. These, as you can see, the bacteria that start like colorless, and within 4 days they start producing the pigment. And this pigment is super saturated, and it can be used to dye textiles, but we also apply it to other materials. Last year, in 2020, we launched a proof of concept together with Puma, the sports brand, and we actually launched a prototype collection of sportswear that we all designed and dyed with the bacteria. It's still not a commercial collection because it's still in a research stage at this moment, but it really showed what the possibilities are for the future, and that natural colors can also be applied to synthetic textiles, which is very uncommon because normally natural colors don't really adhere to synthetic textiles that much. And also we dyed like the garments, we dyed socks, we dyed shoes, so a lot of different materials. And I think it's a really beautiful project that shows how beautiful sustainability can be and how unique, because the patterns that the bacteria leave on the textile, because we grow them on the textile, are super unique, and each piece is different. For this Analog Eco Festival, I tried to do research in how I can use those bacterial pigments for screen printing inks, because until now, actually, we have been dyeing the textiles, but I really want to see if the pigment could also be used to print textiles. And during the Puma project, I experimented a bit with it already, but it wasn't very successful. And for this project, I tried to see if I could use this bacteria dye and add a natural binder to it to create a screen printing paste. Because the pigment is not soluble in water, it has to be solved in alcohol, and that's why I have a dye that is alcohol-based, and it's really hard to find a natural binder that binds with alcohol. So I tried gum arabic, I tried tapioca starch, I tried guar gum, and I also tried a transparent base for screen printing that's not natural, but it's ecologically friendly. But as you can see on the pictures, the alcohol doesn't really mix with the binder. And when I heated the guar gum and the gum arabic, then the alcohol and pigment would actually start to bind and it would become thicker. But once it cooled down, it split again. So that wasn't really something that I could use. Then I found the tapioca starch, which actually worked when it was warm, but then again, when I tried some screen printing, after it was dry, there was even no color left, so that was a pity. But the other color that you see is mixed with screen printing transparent base. And this actually worked. That didn't split, it became just like a smooth paste, but it was still very liquid. I also used spring flowers. I wanted to see if I could use flowers or plants that are normally not used when working with natural colors. Because of maybe the pigment is not saturated enough, or in this case, the flowers are actually, or parts of the flowers are toxic. So that's not something you would like in your clothes, for example. But for art purposes, it's perfectly fine once you take like precautions measures, and these are not that toxic that you cannot safely work with it. So I gathered some spring florals from the neighborhood that were actually wilting, but they had some, I needed the color, so it was not completely wilted yet. And I did some pH tests to begin with, because I know that a lot of natural colors, they really change color when you add different pH levels. So I started with boiling the flowers until there was no color left in the petals. And then I had the water with the color in it, and that was basically the pure ink. What I did then is adding some modification, modifiers to the water to see how the colors would change, because the natural, the pure ink was not super saturated, not as saturated as the pink hyacinth in this case. And then I added alum, which is a mordant to actually bind the color better to the surface. But it's also pH modification substance, so you have to be careful with it if you want to use it, that the color can change. The middle, I added tartaric acid. Then I added one with vinegar, and finally I added soda ash. And as you can see, the soda ash really turned the color a beautiful yellow. And the tartaric acid in the middle, it was really the brightest pink that actually looked like the flower. So I tried to make a screen print ink from the brightest pink with the tartaric acid. And what I found is when I made the ink with natural binders, I also tried again the gum arabic, I tried the guar gum, and the guar gum actually worked the best, so I went with that. But the addition of the tartaric acid also helped to preserve the ink, because normally, like if you don't add preservatives to these natural inks, they start to become moldy after a couple of days. And of course, that's not something you'd like. You can like scrape it off or filter it again, but then you lose a lot of ink as well. So it actually helped a bit in preserving the ink as well. I first tested on some pieces of textile and also some paper swatches to see how the color would react with the textile, with the material, and it actually was like the tartaric acid one and the yellow one with the soda ash was really bright. So I was really surprised actually to see it. And then I started screen printing with the ink. As you can see on the left, this is a print with the pink hyacinth and the tartaric acid on top of double jersey fabric. And it's a very thick fabric that you would normally use in hoodies or like sweatshirts. And it actually helped to get a very saturated color because normally natural colors are kind of muted, are not super bright, it's not super intense, but it actually looks super nice. And I added some layers to see if that would help the color to become even more bright. And on the right, you can see some tests with the pink hyacinth, the purple hyacinth, but also the yellow daffodil. And what I noticed with the yellow daffodil, when I added alum to the ink, it became the brightest yellow that I could find. And with the purple hyacinth, the weird part was that the purple hyacinth ink wasn't actually purple; it was brown. So, and adding tartaric acid to it, then it became like a dusty pink. And when I added alum to it, it became more bluish. But on fabric, it turned out green. So I had basically 3 different flowers, 3 different plants, but I had a larger array of colors because of the pH modification. Then I started to do some tests with the different screen printing paste and also layering the colors. And like I said in the beginning, I really like to simplify my research into really abstract shapes and color compositions. Color studies are a big part of my work, and that's also something that I did here. As you can see on the wall, this is the work I created in the end for the festival. And as you can see on the top left, it starts very saturated and bright, and then it goes down to more muted palette, and in the bottom corner, you can't even see the color anymore. So what I try to do here is test the color on different substrates. So I started at the top part with the double jersey fabric, then a thinner woven cotton fabric in the middle, and on the bottom row that is paper. And as you can see, on the double jersey the color works really well, but on the bottom, on the paper, it's not super bright, and even some of the colors, like even the bacteria color, which is the lilac lavender color, which is still super muted, but on the paper it's just completely disappeared. So, and what I also liked is that the purple hyacinth, which I said I added alum to it and it became green, and I added tartaric acid to it and it became a dusty pink. But on the paper, both colors are green instead of pink and green. So it's always a super big surprise what happens to these colors if you add it to different substrates. And what I really want to show with this work is how we are so used to using Pantone colors, for example, like these color standards that you find in fashion. And actually, when you apply color to different substrates, the color will always change. It will be like the same hue, but it will have different shades and different tones. But our synthetic color industry has been perfected to such a level that on every substrate the color will still match, which is not very natural, and which also requires a lot of science and chemistry. So I really wanted to show what natural colors look like, what the possibilities are, and what happens when you add them to different substrates and when you add different modifications. Thank you for listening.
Nice work.
Thank
Really
you.
like it. Yes, definitely, and also that you only use 3 plants, but because of all the modifications, you have this wide array of colors.
Yes.
We also got some interesting questions in, and of course, I also had a few questions myself. Like toxic flowers, you also work with those. So why toxic flowers? Was it something you were just curious?
Yeah, actually, because, well, there's like this trend going on that everything that's natural, that's actually better for you or healthier than synthetics. A lot of this I see happening in cosmetics, for example. And some of it is true, of course, but not everything is true because most toxic substances come from nature, actually. So I wanted to see that even if it's natural colors and it looks beautiful, it doesn't mean that it's always super healthy for you.
Yeah, so it's more of the critical note towards sustainability that always is advocating for natural fabrics, natural dyeing. You actually say that doesn't have to be true.
It doesn't always have to be true, and you have to be cautious and not believe all the marketing.
Exactly. You have to think a little bit further than just when there's natural. It doesn't mean exactly you have to do your homework.
Yes, basically,
okay.
yeah.
Okay. Was it also because the theme, of course, of the festival is also sustainability, or was that also the trigger for you to research that?
Yes, that's actually how it started. But the sustainability part is also already a big part of my design practice, so I always look for the most sustainable option and really like to investigate those.
Okay, so that's actually, this is a theme, but this is something that is a red thread through all your work already.
Yes, yeah.
And when did that started? Is it something you've been doing all for automatically maybe, or is it something of the last few years?
Yeah, it's started I think 6 years ago. I used to work in fashion companies where I was a designer for fashion collections, and I actually worked in fast fashion. So I really witnessed up close what was wrong with the fashion industry, and both on the social side with exploitation of people and the low wages, but also because of the ecological problems that mainly colors also cause. And that really got me thinking, and also wanting to contribute to the industry in a more positive way. And that's when I really began my own design practice and focused on sustainability.
Because you also used different, let's say, fabrics. Well, you also used paper to print on, but I also heard some just cotton or jersey. So that's a really, like you said, you wear it as a hoodie. So the research that you did, or the plans that you used, is this something that a designer could also use for something that they would wear, for instance, in a few weeks? Just they can use it for their small collection.
Yeah, it's possible. What you always have to be careful of if you use natural colors is that the colors will fade very quickly when you expose them to light. But also some of the colors are not very color fast if you want to wash the clothes. So in this case, like art pieces on the wall, it's not such a big deal. But if you want to wear it, of course, you want to wash it, and then the color will fade as well. What I did actually was mordant the fabric first to have the color really attached to the fabric better. So that's also always something you can do, but it requires a lot of steps and a lot of time to do all these processes.
Just to make sure that if a client buys it, it remains a little bit of how they once bought the garment.
Yeah, but it's also something like maybe that's not really necessary, you know. We're so used to having our clothes like the color lasts for years, but we don't wear our clothes that long. So I always also think if you don't want to wear it that long, you can actually dye something with natural colors, and when you're tired of the color or the color fades, you can dye it again.
That could be an interesting one too, indeed.
Yeah.
You also said you used the 3 plants. So what was the decision to make use of the hyacinths? Why not another plant? You already touched upon a little bit, but was there also a rare decision?
Yeah, I wanted to use toxic plants, and I did research into toxic plants, but some plants were actually so toxic that it's also a bit unsafe to work with them if you don't take all these precautious measures and wear a mask when you boil them, etc. So that was one reason why I used these spring flowers, but also because spring is my favorite season, and I wanted to forage for the materials. I didn't want to buy anything. So that's why I chose the spring flowers, because I started in spring with the research.
Okay, and your work looks like, or it sounds also like a color research almost. Is this something you're also going to work with maybe in your daily practice? That there are some things you're like, hey, this is interesting, maybe I'm going to use that also after this exhibition?
Yeah, that's the plan. This was really like the starting point of the research. There's so many things I really want to investigate further. Also with the bacterial colors, which, the bacterial colors are still very, very light, and I want to see if I can touch them up and make them a bit brighter. So I will kind of continue with this research.
Yeah. And is that like you know, this was more plants, also a little bit bacterial, but you do a lot of bacterial research, color research in your own practice. Is it just as fun, or do you rather work with bacterials and the plants are nice, but the bacterials are far more interesting?
I think so, yeah. The bacteria are my favorite, definitely. Also because it's so new. You know, dyeing with plants has been done since the beginning of like color and textiles. And the bacteria are super new, and there's not much known about it, so that's why I really like it.
Yeah, and or maybe combine it or something in the future.
Yeah.
Let's see if we have a few more questions, or otherwise, go. We have another question. Hello. Do you think, GW, de Grafische Werkplaats can become a hub meeting place for designers, artists, researchers who focus on sustainability, especially color and textiles in their work? Like this could be more of a hub or a breathing place, or...
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Of course, I'm not really a resident here, or I don't work here, but they have also, during this festival, some workshops in working with these natural inks and making them yourselves and screen printing with it. So I definitely think that the research we have done and the knowledge we have gathered will stay here.
And they can even distribute it even more broadly, maybe.
Yeah, and build upon it.
Yeah. Okay, another question, just a compliment. What a nice and stimulating way of using materials and textiles. So also,
thank you.
Also good to know, right?
Yes.
A final question, at least from my side, and if someone has more questions, then please type it in, and then I can ask them directly to Laura. The whole research, was there something, I also asked that to Davey, something that surprised you the most, or something that was like a wow moment that you're like, hey, I didn't expect that really impacted the work that I've eventually made for the festival?
Yeah, it was mainly how the colors change. I knew before I started that the colors can change when you change the pH levels, but the most astonishing was like the purple hyacinth, because I didn't get a purple color, which was super weird. And I still don't get why that is. But I got a green color, I got a good yellow color, a purple, a pink color out of it. But yeah, that was the biggest surprise, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Thank you for your story and all the work that has actually been done behind the work that is shown here, but also upstairs. There's more work. Before you go, I also have, of course, a little present for you. Also the publication. Thanks for your talk. Then before we go to the break, there are a few things I want to tell the audience, because now we've heard, of course, the stories of two great artists, Dewi Bekker and Lyrchmom, but there are more artists who contributed to this festival and also to the exhibition. And you may be, after this talk, you're probably also curious about what is their thought process behind the works, and maybe, you know, how did the theme influence their eventual work that they're showing here. Well, I have to take a quick look. 17th of May from 7:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. there's actually an online talk where the other artist will tell a little bit about their work. It will be moderated by Eugene, so definitely go online and also hear about the other artists and their work and their stories. I think that's a nice part of the festival. And also Carola also quickly touched upon it. if you're here visiting us in the Werkplaats, of course you see all the works in this beautiful, spacious environment. But if it's a nice sunny weather, do you go on the walking tour through the city center of The Hague. All the local retailers that are contributing also to the walking tour, all retailers that work in a sustainable way. In the windows, you will see the work. If they're closed, then there's also QR code, so you can find a little bit more information about both the shop, but also about the work and the artist itself. And you, of course, you get introduced to maybe new local stores that you maybe love to visit again after. I think now we're going for a quick break until around, I think, around 15 minutes, or quite over 20, yeah, for 20 minutes break. So what is it, 50 minutes past 3, we will come back here. And then we have 2 brilliant speakers. So come back, I would say, because we have Simone de Waart and we have Aliki vander Kruijs talking about using innovative ink, innovative materials. So that's the last part of this symposium, materials. See you in 20 minutes. Hi everyone, welcome back. After the short break with the live stream of the Symposium of Analog Eco Festival. For the ones who just tuned in, short a little bit about Analog Eco. The festival is open today and will run until the 28th of May. The festival consists out of walking tours, exposition, we have workshop, we have online talks, so please check out the website and you will see what's all going on and well, follow whatever you like and you find interesting. Also, this symposium, we already had a few speakers before the break that talked about sustainability, circularity. We had 2 artists that shared about their work and how they came to the work that actually are now exhibited at this festival. The other 4 artists will do on 17th of May an online talk moderated by Eugene van der Velde. And they will share more about their work. If you missed it before the break, over a week, this whole symposium will be online on the YouTube channel of Analog Eco Festival. And then for now, we're now at the 3rd part of the symposium. Our first speaker is already standing here, Simone de Waart. The 3rd part of the festival will be about materials. And materials, well, a quote, or maybe even a famous quote of Simone de Waart is, "Materials matter as becoming meaningful interfaces of our design world," which personally I think is a beautiful quote. She's a creative director of Material Sense and Material Sense Lab. She works at universities. She's graduated as a material designer at the Design Academy in Eindhoven. Well, she has an impressive track record, which is too impressive and too long to sum up here. She will now talk about circular design, which I heard, and the importance also about cherishing good design. So Simone de Waart, I think we're very curious about your talk, and well, let's hear it. Oh, and before I forget, if you tune in, you see below the live stream a form. So if you have any questions about Simone de Waart and her talk, please leave your question there. And after her talk, we will address them and then she will answer those questions as much as possible. So, yes.
Thank you, Nanette, for this lovely and extensive introduction. And also thank the Grafische Werkplaats and Carola also for the invitation. And although it's a bit weird to talk to a screen, it's also lovely to be here in a physical space, so to say. And yeah, for me, if you talk about my love for material, I think it's the best way of saying it is that everything begins as an end material and ends as material. That means that we can design everything in between and that we take care of all these stages. By Peter Zumthor. I don't want to go more into details because you already gave this lovely introduction, but I think what's good to mention, because if you talk about materials, it's my background is as an industrial designer or material designer because I specialized myself, but I'm tuned way more into research further on, and finally I'm now more orchestrating materials, so to say. This is also interesting how this changed over time. And In the university, I focus mainly on the sensorial aspect and the interaction with materials, interactivity, and in our studio we design, of course, for clients, but since not all clients can work or can include sometimes sustainability, but not fully, we also raise Material Science Lab. That gives us way more freedom to experiment. And Carola already introduced it, that it's so important for innovation that you collaborate and in an interdisciplinary way. And that means that that also gives some room for experimentation, but at the same time it is also teaming up and finding the right experts and also the consortia. I think I just mentioned a few things. If we see what's happening, if you talk about materials, about what we globally produce, although it ends way more than we are further ahead now, you see that almost all materials like increased enormously, but also especially the hybrids, if you look at the last part. And the hybrids, if you talk about circularity, that's a problem sometimes. So you also have to see how you can figure out to work with monomaterials, for instance. Or find ways to disassemble them. So this is the design part where you were talking about. Well, we make a lot of exhibitions. This is what we've been doing for more than 15 years. And you also see this change from physical exhibitions to virtual exhibitions, even before Corona times, I must say. But what's interesting, if I look at the first one that we did, like Rematerialize, that was a start, and you see it was exhibited in Beyond Green, and we talked about sustainability in a way more way of how to integrate technology, whereas now the technology is part of how we change it on a molecular level and how we add things to make materials adaptive in that sense. And here you also see what's interesting, because we also always show the work of scientists, designers, artists, and the industry, of course, but it was separate. And what you see nowadays is that this is already a collaboration, and this is the most exciting part of what we are doing today. We're all doing, I mean, this is also where it's challenging. And this was the last physical one, that's before Corona, of course, but it's interesting to show that it's more materials future life. So we talk about which is important for materials. What do you do with these materials after its life? And that's something you immediately think about, and there are different ways of approaching it. And here it was also, we showed, and I have some examples of that, the design cases, because it is from larger industries, it is from small, medium enterprises, from artists, but it is more like the whole business case, the whole connection between the supply chain is also designed. So just to give you an idea, and it is also to show you, like, if you make these exhibitions, it's the same that you think about. It's not only the materials, but also how we exhibit it. So everything fits one van, so it is low cost in transportation, but also the material that are used, like we made a carpet out of this, and this carpet is made of bio-based packaging. So you can reuse it, and even when you don't reuse it, it's not harmful for the environment, so to say. So all these things around it are also taken into account. And well, you see some examples. I thought about when talking about this space, the graphic workshop. It was like, yeah, we are not that specialized, of course, because materials are in that broad sense interesting. But the bio-based Wunderkammer was also an exhibition, but at the same time, it was a way to find and create new collaborations. And this is printed also in one color to also make sure that you don't use that much. And also it is done in such a way that the printer used this really biological ink for its offset. And then also we showed, and this is something that you see way more happening, you know about all these like growing materials, the living matter is also called. But in the bio-based Wunderkammer, we started with bio-based, and this is algae, and Algae Link creates this installation, but especially they focus on these large quantities of manufacturing algae for all different purposes, from food to finally also products. And you see also it is used for 3D printing. And then we had this Alga Carta paper, which is also made from algae. And at that time it was really expensive, but that's also what you see happening, that these prices lower when we make more use of it. And here it was also, you see that they prevent Venice, the clogging of the Venice River. So the whole setup of this paper was part of that. But you see also, in this case, I asked also an artist, it is a photographer, to zoom in, not only for the algae prints, but also how can you put this bio-based materials on a pedestal. So what you see here, and since we're talking way more about molecular redefinitions, it was here with the electronics microscope. He zoomed in on these eggplant fibers and the rubia, the pigmentation, but also the biopolymer potato starch. And it could look as very something dull, but here it is, you see how magnificent these constructions are. And by putting them on a pedestal, you also elicit the role of these materials. And here you see some beeswax printing to also see how we can lost mold waxes also change. And if you talk about the plastics, of course, we don't have to talk about plastic soup that much, but what I like about how this artist visualized this, like it's a global problem. So everything that we use and all materials that we use, it doesn't matter. You can take care of local stuff, but since so many things are produced in a way that if you use it here, even if it's on small scale, things happen and also change. So there is an influence globally, and it's good to be aware of that. And sometimes it is not that striking, but since if you now remember, if you are aware that as a human you consume per week this almost a credit card, if you imagine that, it's way more that it influences your health and your body. That also makes sense. And here you see, if you talk about also screen print, this is a screen print done also by one of the designers, graduated at industrial design. And you see here that the print is also interactive, that you are aware of what kind of inner climate and how the inner climate needs to be cleaned, how far you are with that. So by using this cleaning ink as part of this interior wall piece, it is cleaning your environment, and at the same time it makes you aware of how far you are with that process. And that's way more what's happening, that you integrate all these elements that can have these extra functionalities as well. And here you see it working. You can also, it's also about the interaction, so you can influence it as well, and besides the awareness. I think this is some examples from the exhibition that I would like to show if you talk about these plastics. And what I like, this is Footwear. I'm, by the way, wearing them myself because I'm a fan of them. And they also are really good. I mean, how they walk, and that's really good, the padding. But the interesting thing is that it is a base cotton, but all recycled materials are used here. In combination, I mean, it's what it is produced by industries and is collected by Footwear. But it's nice because you see this touch of this expression, and I think this is also something, if you talk about the aesthetics, the sustainable aesthetics, it is about the expression of the materials. Something happening, or is it all okay? Yeah, I also see things happening here, sorry. And this is another one, because this is Deso carpet, but I think what's interesting, we know that we can reuse PET bottles, that we can recycle polyamide. So we know this kind of from fishing nets and all this stuff, but it goes way further. If you talk about, this is the yarn made from these collected pieces and recycled, but it's also talking about the backing, and then it comes together with bio-based materials and finding also new ways to do that and dismantle them. But at the same time, you see there is also chalk used as in part of the process. That comes from what the water cleaning management system. So also these parts are reused. So what you see happening in materials is that bio-based and also reuse, all these things kind of comes together and mingle and meet each other, so to say. And this is done by Rens, but I also want to show that even when you talk about the whole process in what's happening in a manufacturing process, also at the end there's still leftovers, and you can also reuse them by this very specific paint that mixes in with the color, which is done in a very beautiful way. Or you can also design for especially these things that, I mean, things deteriorate, things change, and then I'm talking again about the sustainable aesthetics, because that's what I really believe in. And here it is designed in such a way that especially the yarn is really strong, but as soon as it starts to age, it is made for repair. I think also the first speaker mentioned that, but made for repair is something that we can work with. I show some examples from what we're doing in Material Science Lab, because I talked about the experiments and the collaboration, and it's more like field labs, that sometimes it is someone has a question, or sometimes it starts, it's always from a materials perspective, but it can start with also material, there's a leftover, and please can you help doing something with this? I'd skip a few, but I think this one is especially interesting if I also see this happening over time. We did this for, this is recycled textiles, but based on the costumes of KLM, and these things will never be reused again, never goes back into a new cycle, as not known. So by especially this textile recycling is now so far, and there are people, the technologists have also created the machinery to also dismantle things in this very precise way, up to the yarn level. But in this case, it was like the first stage, and you have this yarn, we have this beautiful color, but the material was not that good, not yet. But it's also things of like, okay, what can you do with this felt? This is a non-woven, but you still can use it for acoustics, for instance. And the good thing is that all these things like takes time. So development takes time. And that's what you see happening. We started with a kind of lower quality, but these qualities rise enormously. And I think what's also happening, if I see this IKEA, maybe it's not the best example to me personally, but I think what's interesting is that IKEA as a company takes this into these larger quantities, and also that we are that far that you can produce it. And if you see on the right, it's the Lease jeans by Mud. And Mud Jeans is having this complete new way of dealing with it by leasing your jeans, but also extending, prolonging the lifetime. But even after the lifetime, there is an end of life anyway. And you see it in this collaboration of these designers together with IKEA. And that is what now it gives the whole global production a push, but also local production, don't forget about that. And what's important to also show that at first, that's what Thomas Rauch said, materials had no identity. Okay, we give them identity as a designer, which is important, but it's also good that by having these passports now, you know exactly what's inside, you know exactly the ingredients, so it's way easier to also think about the second life. And it's a lot, we work also with building industry, and it's really well used, and it goes really fast now, so that's good. Yet you see also dismantling and taking care of dismantling, but also the inside platform especially for interior. I mean, giving this identity helps also the materials. And even this kind of things, I give this source from the ministry, but it's just to also, as you, because we are in a workplace, how could you handle these as a designer? It's also good that you see, okay, sorry, by the way, it's in Dutch, but you see, you can look it up and see exactly, okay, what is the impact and how does it contribute? So you can make your decisions on what you would like to use. We usually do this also by a wheel. It goes too far to maybe go into all the details. I check the time now, but you put the materials center, like it's a center stage, and you see that throughout this whole change of the elementary part until the production supply to the end of life, you take care of everything. And we take usually into account all these aspects. It's more of a checklist. You can just say, okay, do I avoid hazardous substances? I can make other choices. I can combine things differently. I can make them to repair or to disassemble. All these things are possible, and it's just like a helpful tool. But if you think about all these things, in general, I would say I believe in this material attachment. So this literally the connectivity, and especially for all this work that is produced also here, like artwork, these things you maintain, you keep, and you maybe how you find also new connections with new people. So this is something I personally believe in, and I also had this other picture which was interesting because it is I think some of the work is shown also by the first speaker, and I had the same, like, oh, this is marvelous. You can create this digital print, you can create digital fashion, and then you don't pollute anything anymore. But there's still something to think about, because if there is one artist who said, well, I stopped doing this now because my art piece by the NFT tokens and using blockchain is using such an enormous amount of energy that you still have to reconsider, do I use this? So it's not that I have the answer, but it's something to think about, because technology-wise you can all do this, but still, how would you work with it? I first will introduce it, that might be better, because this was a question from the industry that they have. It's a large European car manufacturer who produces from 30,000 hides per year. They have like 40% left over, and they said, okay, yeah, anyway, it's a shame that we have that, but we still, can you find other options to deal with that enormous amount? So this is where Lasting Leather Lab came in to collaborate with, I asked designers for this, a life cycle expert, and the industry, the scientists, to see how we can deal with it.
Leather, used on a large scale for luxury car interiors. As a natural material, leather can have many marks, which are considered defects, and every hide is checked thoroughly. Creases, scratches, bumps, and other flaws are marked before the leather can be cut. Each pattern piece has its own mold that needs to be fitted on the hide as efficiently as possible. Every hide is slightly different, so there is never a perfect fit. When the pattern pieces are cut, the leftover leather full of holes is called a skeleton. About 40% of each hide is lost this way. One of the main European automotive leather companies processes 30,000 hides per day. Lasting Leather Lab investigates ways to give this high-quality leftover material a sustainable new purpose as a biocomposite.
So a real challenge, but I think it's also good to mention that anyway the material is already waste, because there's a lot of discussion, of course, going on about this process, and sure, it is not a clean process, not at all, so there needs to be a lot to be changed, also in surface textures and all these kind of things, how it's treated. But anyway, it is, we still eat so much meat. It's still the same amount worldwide, so it is already waste product. So try to use it and try to use as much as possible. Here you see on the right our team, because I talked about this collaboration, so that's important. Here you see some of the parts. And this was in Dutch Design Week, the presentation. I skipped the leather chain because it is already mentioned, but I think it's more important to see that if you talk about these things, and this is all when it comes to circularity, it starts with some pieces and it's threaded, it cascades further and further down. So that means that it is, sometimes you need ways to find solutions for all these different stages. And it's also finding positions. We calculate this so to also understand more of this value. And I thought I'd just show some last examples to round it up. Yeah, since I've been working in the workshop, a comparable one, I think a bit smaller. You might know it in Eindhoven. But to see also how can you just stretch it by using the weight and just change properties of materials without adding anything. So just keep it as it is. And it's the same like pressed with water. You only use the water, but you don't use anything more. But if you talk about this cascade, because it was quite purely used, if it goes down to anything else, like just what we have, the majority is black with some spickles and some colors, then you completely transform the material, and that's also what's happening, of course. So here you see the transformation into biocomposites, and that's what we're taking further also with scientists to see how we can also use other waste streams to combine it in a clever way, and use also bacteria for the the different stages of the different composites and the different the variations. And this is the work by Simone. This is also from the leftovers to kind of return, to give the cow its original skin back by partly embroidery. And it's also more like ode to the cow, so to say. And this is what I brought. It might be strange for the people listening at home, but I brought, because if we are processing this, so I'm here cleaning it's more like wetting the material, it bleeds, so to say, that's how they call it. So then you still have a leftover, it's maybe I just have to show it because then you know what's happening, it's in the gamma, but this is what you finally have. So I hope that it's a challenge for people here, that even the waste that I produce, that it can be reused by someone else. So I hope that it can be an ink and finally something that we can also use. So I think that's it, and thank you very much for all your attention, and you can find me here different ways.
Yeah, it's interesting. I will put a pause.
It looks awful right now.
We will research if it's possible, and I hope during the festival the people of the Werkplaats have time to experiment with this material, and it's very thin, so we have to cook with it to make inks, and we let you know, and all the people of the festival who are looking what the research of this ink is. Maybe it's hopefully it will be the best ink such as Aliki, and we can she will talk later now about her ink, but I hope but it's good to start, it's good to begin. Yeah. And we never know where we go, but maybe it's we can look.
Yeah, thank you very much in advance for all your effort.
Thank you for your story, and with some comments coming in, mainly saying, nice work, thank you so much for this take on materials. So it was nice to see how people at home reacted to it. We also had a few questions coming in, quite interesting questions. A simple one, where does the love for materials actually come from?
Oh, what a beautiful question, but also hard to answer. Maybe it's the physicality. I think I'm especially interested in the sensorial properties of materials and the interaction, like what you mentioned in the first statement. So it started for me at Design Academy also with glass and knitwear inside, but then I thought I don't want to be this girl with only the glass girl, so to say. There's way more. And then kind of entire world opened up, and it's still endless because materials kind of it is an emerging field, still is.
And it is everything, right? I mean, everything we touch.
Everything. The first thing that you touch, so it's like a confirmation of what you already perceive intuitively, and that's what I really like about it.
Yeah. You also say it's an immersive. The field is emerging.
Emerging, yeah.
Is that also because of circularity nowadays? Is such a big thing that is linked to each other somehow?
Yeah, also because now you're way more aware of the main ingredients like resource that we use, and that also our resources are endless. So that also means that you have to be clever in taking care of these resources again. So it's a revalue of that. But at the same time, like technologies emerge and the fields kind of meet in a more organic way, I have to say. So yeah, that is maybe the reason, and still all these different fields were there, but they kind of can easily find each other now, which also makes it easier to combine also properties and find and design new properties with these materials. That's also...
So first it were more separate people working on their own thing, and now people are collaborating more easily and
Yeah, collaborating, and also more like, it was like what you said, separate material science field, or you are a material designer. But that's why I also mentioned orchestrating. It's more that we think about, we walk through the entire supply chain. So that means that you have so many more new combinations to make. Yeah.
I can imagine also that it's very, that is happening a lot in the materials side. And like you touched upon earlier, you know, you have now designers working together, you have scientists working together, and you said something about that it's a really great thing and valuable work, but it's also a challenge. So can you elaborate a little bit on how that is a challenge sometimes?
Yeah, that's a good one. Well, it's finding, and I mean, the more projects are now run, the more I understand of how it works. It's also tweaking. I think working together is the same like in materials. Most people who know that, and especially you, if you experiment, you combine things. It's like cooking. It's like creating new stuff, more ingredients. You add something, there's something more you need. But the same work with ingredients is like if you compare it to people. So sometimes there's also what I found out, sometimes we have all the people working together from the very early beginnings. It doesn't work. Sometimes you need some time off and find the right momentum for all these experts that you introduce. So that is more tweaking this collaboration setting, so to say, and defining the best strategies. But it's good if everyone has this like open mindset. That is something that really, that in the end works everywhere.
Okay.
That's
We have a few questions now coming in about today. How do you think manufacturers could be stimulated more to find sustainable ways to produce their product? Should the government be involved?
Yeah, that's a good point. Government should be involved, maybe not directly in this process, but by certification, for instance. And that's also what's now happening. So it means that also taking down the production of plastic bags, because it's forced. That's one of those things. But even ISO norms, all these kind of things help, because if it's just a request, we all should go towards that. Yeah. So, and we have now the 2050 goals, the UN goals, all these things like where it's also governmental regulation that helps.
They help companies to make
it's
progress.
A push. It's a push, because otherwise it's always like, especially in the beginning, all these materials are more expensive than virgin materials. So there should be a push to do it, rather than just being very conscious, because there are also people that make these conscious decisions, of course, but still, if there's so much money involved, you sometimes need another push.
It creates an equal level playing field. Like, it's not like if I do it, then I will be the one that not making enough money, and then my competitor takes all market share, for instance.
Exactly.
So I can imagine, and I can imagine it's also helping maybe your work. Your work gets easier, maybe, because of.
Hopefully in the future, but what you say, the level playing field, that's absolutely true. And if you see what has happened over the last couple of years, that's already promising.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have one final question coming in, very interesting. Adohet says, one side note, I don't know about anything specific about the leather company mentioned, but usually leather is actually not a waste product from the meat industry because the quality is too low. So the animals are indeed, bred for their skin. Do you know, that's not for this leather company? That's,
definitely not. And it's a good comment that, I don't know the name, but the one who asked this question said that it's too low quality. That's true. So the things that we work with are low quality.
Okay.
That's the downside of it. So that's also why what I said about the cascading, it ends up with something that is crushed into smaller pieces because of this quality. And if there's still enough good quality, you take this into smaller parts that can be reused. Yeah, but that's a good point. But this is slaughter waste.
Okay, and the quality, can it, when things change or people find it more important, can be the quality also improved? That the leftover skin on a certain moment has a higher quality, so you can actually use it for multiple purposes, or is it a general issue?
Yeah, that's a general issue, but also because there is also finishings on top to hide, and that sounds strange in this context, but to hide also these lower qualities.
Ah, okay.
That means that there's also finishings on top. And it's not always like you hope you have this pure material, but it's just 5% that is biotanned.
Okay, so that's only 5%. That's
up
not
till
much.
now. There's not much. So that's what I said. There's still a challenge also for the industry to do this way better, but it's also because it's extensive and it's a request. The more we request this, the more it's interesting to also
like your
produce
example with IKEA.
Yeah. Larger quantities. Yeah.
Well, thank you for this great talk and for the interesting also answers on the questions from the public. Also to you, I'm going to, of course, give you the publication with the in-house printed ink.
Thank you.
Which, thank you. It was really interesting to hear more about the innovations in materials. And well, I would say enjoy also the next speaker.
I will, and the exhibition. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Then thank you, Simone de Waart, and we go to the final speaker already from this afternoon in the symposium, who is Aliki vander Kruijs. Well, some of you may know her work, or may know even her, but her work, or her most famous work, is before I say it wrongly, Made by Rain, and eventually that ended up in a collaboration with Nike, with if you really nice garments created out of her concept, Made by Rain. She might tell you more about it in her talk. Also, what is actually more relevant for now is that the ink that she uses, for instance, she has had a project with a Dutch sustainable fashion designer, Elsing Ringhuis. The ink that she used for that after season is used in the posters of Analog Eco. It's also used in the packaging that you've seen me giving around here of the publication. So the residual ink that is actually used here for different purposes, so nothing actually goes to waste, or at least almost nothing is going to waste. She will tell, not here at the location itself, we will switch to a Zoom call, and she will tell from her home about what she does. I think we're now going. I'm not sure how it works. Are we now going to people? Okay, people see. Okay.
I would thank you very much, Simone, for the inspiring talk and how you weave several elements together. I recognize a lot of your love for materials and having the healing properties of materials around in the surrounding. I would like to share my presentation, and I would briefly introduce work I did before, because it's part of the ink that is just mentioned, and I will share my screen. So I'm Aliki, and I have a background in fashion design. I studied at Artes. The fashion department, and after that I worked for G-Star, and then I worked on the material lab, let's say. What was a dream job back then, but I always felt that I would like to have more, to use material more as a mean of communication. So I went to the Sandberg Institute, where I studied applied art, and there I combined my love for photography and about recording things and textiles. And one of the projects I did there was, it's called Weathering Blue, where I used the weather to as a factor to work with color. And I painted some. So what you see is the template of a shirt. And I wanted to. What I learned with G-Star is that everything had to be more quick in fashion. So I wanted to bring time in fashion, and so exposing blue painted colors to the weather. And then I kind of harvested the textiles. I made these shirts, which were very influenced by the weather. During this project, I discovered this. I was documenting it, and then I got all these raindrops when it started to rain on the textiles. And then I thought, okay, this is super beautiful. How can I imprint this and really make it stay. So then my project Made by Rain came into being, and since 2012, when it rains, I try to make fabrics. Not so much as in the beginning anymore, but still I'm doing it because I want to make a rain atlas. And here you see some of my scarves, where, because the rain is always different, and I came up with a kind of printing technique. So the textiles are prepared, and then I put them in the rain, and then the rain is always different, so you would have different outcomes. And this started in working with the Textile Museum. And when I was doing, because back then they still had this digital printer. And when I was working there, I saw next to the printer, I saw a jerry can. And then I asked the printer, like, what is this jerry can? And then he said, this is the waste ink generated by the printer. And so this inkjet printer flushes the pipelines, the print pipelines. It's once in a while it's flushed in order to have all the colors running equally. So the print company I work now with, I asked them, like, okay, so you have the same machine, so you would have the same system. And I asked for them, I hear some things happening, but I will continue. So I asked them, okay, can I maybe collect your waste in order to research the possibilities of having to use this color instead of that it goes to chemical waste? So I thought I'd take 12 jerry cans, and then I could maybe do 12 approaches. And maybe 12 is also for a year. So I used this 12 containers to start researching what the color is. And on the right, you see the colors of the ink, which is the darkest one is the pure color. And then on top, it's the diluted color. So I had this on my studio, and it was there. And then I visited Hogervorst, and she gave me a beautiful book about the sea life and about, I was reading this ocean flower book, and in this book there was this spread. And then I saw this and I thought, wow, this is exactly the color shades that I have in my studio. But it's coming from a total different era, total different production system, but still it's the same shades. And what you see on the left, it's the shades of purple that are produced by snails. And in Rome, the Roman people, they were wearing purple, and it was a color of status. And this color is like a color that is thrown away. So I wanted to balance these two facts and about the meaning and the value of color. So I started the research to what this color is, what it could be. I did a whole exploration of the history of the color of purple. And what you see on the right, or the shell with the glass, it's a real murex snail, because normally, back in the days, textiles were painted purple by using snail milk. So you have to milk a snail, and through sunlight it would expose, and the chemicals would react and would bind to the textile. And also in my experiments, I found out that when I was working with the ink, there's this green hue coming. So I was just gathering a lot of visual notes, let's say, and then I started to make a project. Here you see, I have a pile of research, but my question was, like, how would a fashion system act when it follows the principles of sowing and harvesting, common agriculture, moving along with the natural seasons? Because nowadays it's like there's always the new season, but there's a lot of waste generated. There's a lot of material staying behind. So my question was, what if we add a new season to the whole season system, which is called after season, and then we can just put in there things from the previous seasons. And so that means that it's a given color and not maybe always a prognose or like a forecast, which I liked. And because in my work I try to make systems to make color appear, and it's not about that I foresee a color happening that way. It's more that the colors happen in itself. And so I started to work with the ink and see how I could dye textiles with it, how I could manipulate textiles. So I really was looking for the aesthetics, actually, what I could achieve with this ink, because I really believe that you can reuse it and make maybe an alternative black with this ink, especially when it's used total dark and not diluted. And during the State of Fashion in Arnhem in 2018, I think it was, I presented this collection of materials. So I wrote an essay based on all these information I gathered. And one thing it's like a thought experiment maybe, but I would like to share that this is my uncle, Ome Henk. And he is wearing the same velour pullover since he graduated high school. And he just retired and he's still wearing only this garment. So my question was like, okay, so there's now this velour pink sweater at the Primark for £8. Would this person also wear it 40 years later, the same shirt? So my uncle is super uniform in his way of dressing, but in that way he doesn't need so much. I thought it was quite inspiring for me that you just choose for one very archetypal piece and that you would continue wearing that, repairing it. It became his style and his identity. Because I saw this green hue coming in the edges of my, like when I was drawing with the ink, I thought if you would put 8 colors together, because it's a combination of 8, this ink, maybe you can also dissect the colors again. And I collaborated with the Wageningen University, with the master students through academic consultancy training. It's called an ACT. So a group of master students, it's like an interdisciplinary group, was formed around my questions, and they did a whole analysis of what this color is and how the color could be broken down. And also they looked at how the wastewater can be more clean, maybe, or more become better cleaned before it would run into the draining system. And when they did the presentation of the report, they kind of said to me like, yeah, we didn't really found a new color, but we did found a lot of technical information, which is, as for me as an artist, a designer, was not really usable in the way of articulating something new with it, but very valuable to have and maybe approach a company with it. But when they opened their box to show what they have been fermenting, let's say, because they use yeast and sugar to make the bacteria degrade the color, then suddenly there was this green hue because they forgot, it was a few days longer than their experiments that they were calculating. So then finally there was this green color where I was super happy with, and it's a very beautiful color. It looks a bit like celadon, like a Chinese origin glaze. So it's a very special green hue, and I tested it, and it's possible to dye textiles with it. So for me, it was very, and also when you for instance, in a computer, if you invert purple, it becomes green. So for me, it made it quite round the purpose of my research. And through this collaboration with the Wageningen University, and also Kim that you saw, and also Laura that you already saw, we were in a team of making a dress for Louise Fresco, the head of the board of the Wageningen University. And together we created this outfit for her for the jubileum of 100 year of Wageningen University, opening of the jubileum year. So I teamed up with Elzien Gringhuis to make this dress. And I collaborated with Elzien before with this ink, and this was part of the Wool Mark prize, where I used the ink to trace her patterns and to make edges fading. So this was one of the, actually the fashion, like Elzine has one of the containers. So the one container is a conversation with Elzine. Another container was a conversation with Schuller and de Waal, because they saw my presentation at the State of Fashion, and then they saw my ink, and then they thought, but we can use it. And then they made a collection about reusing their archive. So we were using this ink to manipulate pieces from their archive. And what we did is we colored it with the erased ink, but the textile that is underneath covering the floor, that's also becoming the next garment. So we sprayed it, and the leftover, you see these white edges are so here in this images you see the leftover from the garment that is prepared. So it's a kind of loop or production system to come to patterns that you would not think of, but happens, which I think that's part of my work method. And this was shown in Paris, where the models were cleaning the streets in this waste ink garments. And to compile all the broad, or the ink stain research I did, I made this booklet, which is a combination of 12 pages, 12 spreads. And together it's an open book. You can order it in different ways. And in the middle there's an essay by Ruby Hoete and the essay that I wrote myself about all the ingredients. And there's this letter that I also presented at the State of Fashion, and it's in the it's also in the book. But actually the last sentence I think it's quite nice. It says, could the textile printer offer purple as an alternative to a standard black for clothing and bags used for temporary events such as festivals? And actually, that's what I really liked, is that because I was asked to be part of the Analog Eco Festival, but at the moment I'm doing a residency in Jan van Eyck in Maastricht. So for me it was too much to do this, to participate. But I did say, okay, one container you can maybe use to investigate this ink as a possibility, as a carrier for the communication, which in the end happened. So I'm very happy that maybe the workshop, the Grafische Werkplaats can have a new color to their, that people can print with this color. And the last one is that I'm teaching at the KBK, at the Art Academy in Den Haag. And in the color lab with the second year students, we are also studying with this ink. So they come up with very nice new colors and approaches. So it's an ongoing material. It's a very open source project, actually, if you can say it like that. So that's it. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Aliki, for your presentation. So I will speak to you from here to Zoom. For the people at home, I see Aliki also on the screen here. So your work, what I understood, was really about ink and what is possible with ink on different type of fabrics and patterns. So was that interest already coming up in the work what you did for G-Star, or has that been more something that had grown your interest when you stopped there?
Well, at G-Star there's not so much ink used, but it's of course denim, a denim highlight. So I did a lot of research to denim and the sustainability of denim, also the aging, and so for me, it at that given context, denim and blue was more the focus. Yes, but it was not that ink was not really part of it, and of course I'm very aware of the pollutive production system of indigo, especially making a dark indigo. Has a lot of extra chemicals that they need. So that's I was very aware of it, but I also felt that I should step out to say maybe something about it again, because for me it didn't feel that I could do it from within there, saying something about the industry.
And then how did the interest in really the focus on ink and developed in your own practice? Was it more that something you came across?
I think it's related to color. I think, like, especially the project in the weathering blue, it started really with blue pigment. So for me, I think ink is a good vehicle to talk about color. And it's not that I'm a water and a color person, so together I think it's...
Therefore, Made by Rain was a perfect combination actually of your two...
Exactly, so I think it's a combination.
Two interests, yes. And also because your ink is used in your residue ink is used in the posters. How did you come up with the idea that, okay, well, I have this ink left, maybe you can do something with it? Or is it something you initiated, or is it in a collaborative form that you came up with that?
Well, it's more that, like when I spoke with Carola, when she invited me to participate, it was quite also, like, a question was because she knew about the project, so I could bring this material in the project as a counter to the natural colors. But actually, I did already so much research that it was only a technical twist to make. And for me, I think it's even more, it is the right context to use it in a communication, maybe, better than have again a new project running around it. For me, it felt very logic that it kind of suited. And it's contextualized by the question, and I think that's a very nice outcome.
And what I also heard that this was actually the first time that the ink that you used was actually screen printed.
Yes.
Is that something, did you experience with it yourself before, or was it something that wasn't?
I did put it in a medium, but I didn't, like, I focused more on the collaboration with others and to have the ink without a medium, but now there's a medium added, and then you need a workshop, which I,
And then it's how do you say it? Just because of you needed a medium because it's a communication tool that was used. So it was not like you rarely didn't do it before because it was a totally different project.
I mean, it's a medium, like you need a binder, you need a pasta.
Oh, okay.
So medium.
And it was and also because the focus on ink and also the theme, of course, of Analog Eco is sustainability. You already touched upon that. When you worked at G-Star, that sustainability, of course, denim has a strong link. Is it also something that you apply in your own work? You work together with Elsing Gringhuis, or is that something that is more organically sort of grown, or is it something that you do very rarely?
That I do, what do I do?
That you're very aware that you're working with sustainable designers. Is that a conscious decision?
But I don't. For me, it's super logic because I use the elements and I use the nature, so I feel it's logic to take care of who I choose to work with. And also, for instance, because I did this Made by Rain in the first year, so like 2013, 14, I spent a lot of energy of trying to make the process more ecological and with blend-based inks, for instance. But the thing is that the quality of the fineness of the ink of what I use now makes that the pattern appears very well. It's almost like high res. So I was working with Leentje van Hengel in Amsterdam, and then we agreed upon that the next project I would do, then I would take all the emphasis on doing it totally sustainable or like the most as possible, because the Made by Rain textiles are also very beautiful, and I think they bring another awareness to people. I don't know, it's another level of thinking about sustainability and about taking care of the elements.
Yeah. But I can imagine if your work is inspired by the natural elements, that being conscious about the environment and the world, that's part of the way of thinking,
Definitely, and that's what.
Yeah.
That's because for me it doesn't really felt good in the beginning that I used the rain, but then when I wash the textiles, some blue ink goes into the sewage system. So for me that was not a right balance, and that's why it took a lot of effort to come to this solution.
Okay. Let's see. I think we have one more question. Wait 1 sec, just to activate the iPad again. A few remarks, very inspiring, always good to know, of course. In the waste ink, you got natural or chemical. It was not so clear for Ellen which link you did. It was not clear for me which ink you used. Did you make it yourself? So, first of all, if it's natural chemical and whether you made it yourself.
It's reactive ink. It's a chemical ink. It's like a chemical made ink, and it's normally like the ink is made by the printer flushing its cables, but it's a combination of 8. Like it's CMYK, an extra black. So they're really cartridges that make together one purple, like black purple.
As an end result.
Yes, and it's a reactive ink.
Okay, and now because as a final question, someone asked, you were actually asked to be also one of the designers to work for the festival. Well, you have a great residency over there. So what is it? What we can maybe expect from you in the coming few weeks, or are there some big plans you can already share with us?
There's an open studio coming up at the end of June. So I'm preparing an open studio at the Jan van Eyck here.
Okay, and
doing new textiles, weaving in the Textile Museum. And I'm doing a broad research to the colors of the landscape here. Okay,
well, I think if someone is going a weekend away, then go to I think Maastricht and visit the open studio. I want to thank you for calling in via the Zoom call and that you shared a little bit about how the perspective on using ink and being influenced about all the natural elements, which has, of course, a link to sustainability. And I'm not sure, I don't know, I don't see when someone is out of screen or in of screen, but great that you have talked us through your work. And then we're almost at the end of this this symposium. Time flies, right?
Yeah, I find it very nice. It was also a very good technique. So thanks, Men, for helping us with all the techniques, the Dutch Media Group. And also you, Nanette, to moderate the festival or the symposium. And I will look forward to the festival, to look for the exhibition and the workshop. You will give also one workshop.
Yeah, on Thursday. Yes, on Thursday about embedding sustainable practices in your own working space. So yeah.
So if you want to know more about it, so go to the workshop, and then she can do it everywhere. But when she is here in the Grafische Werkplaats, the people, the participants, they make a little research book for each other with all the tips which they came.
Yeah, how you can embed sustainability in your makers workshop. So it is actually meant for makers that starting to think about, okay, how can I embed sustainability in the work that I do? I'm already interested in, I may be doing already here and there some things, and this workshops hopefully pushes you to go a little bit further. Yeah, to go to next. Yeah, to have it on the next step.
Yeah, and I'm also looking forward to the talk with Aniela because then she goes with very new materials. It's that a talk about materials with mycelium, so it's very hip. And also from Remy, she goes back to the history and to the loop, all the time. So it's also very nice that we have some talks go further about the materials. And I think for me it's really a beginning to work in this werkplaats and to research what's possible, because it's so wide, it's so amazing what you can do, but you have time, you have to be an open mind and to research. But what do you want to say?
Well, I think because I've been here a few weeks ago, what is it already, a few weeks, maybe a few months ago, it was when the artists actually started working on their projects and had, I think, also a natural dyeing workshop. So it was still really experimenting and searching, okay, what I'm going to do and what I'm going to make for this festival. And it's really great to see now all the end results here at the exhibition, and also to hear the stories about how they took the knowledge of the workshops into their final work. And I think also this symposium is, of course, a really nice kickoff of the full festival, which takes still until 28th of May. So I think it was a great kickoff with great speakers. Shall we, at the end, show the back for if people, because the Grafische Werkplaats is open during the workshop, and you're here. Of course, you can see the exhibition. You can get this bag, which is also in-house printed. It's really nice, and also the map for the walking tour is in it, so you can still have the experience also outside. I think this is quite what we.
Yeah, and you can also buy the publication in the web shop. Yeah. But come and see and look and think and talk with each other about this theme, I think.
Definitely, very important theme for. Going forward, also for makers and for the industry.
Okay, thank you.